Um, Please keep any discussion or comments you have on topic and relevant. We may not have all the answers, but we will do our best even after the call to find them for you. We do have resources that we can leverage. Please mute your microphone when not speaking, like I said. If you're on a phone and you're dialing in, you can press *6 on your keypad to either mute your microphone or unmute it. And also, please respect each other's opinions and points of views. I'm sure that everyone will have some different opinions about the things we're talking about today, but that's okay because we can focus on what we agree on and we can find ways on how to come closer together in understanding on the rest of things. So the agenda today, more or less, we're going to have well, this is the introduction. We're going to talk about street safety. So that's going to be under the topics of like biking, speeding, driving, walking, walking to school, things like that. We're going to talk about neighborhood safety. So that's more of how we interact with our neighbors, the crimes we've been seeing in Millbrae, and generally the safety of Millbrae. We're going to go over the topic of police accountability and defunding the police. So obviously that's a major topic in the country. It was a huge topic a couple of weeks ago, and it still is as work is being done to advance the topic. So we're going to sort of demystify what defunding the police means. I think Ann and I will give our thoughts on that particular topic, and we'll see how it ties into Millbrae as a whole. And I also wanted to talk about mental health. So mental health, how that ties into community safety, and the priority points that Ann and I have on improving mental health in our community for the long term. Ann, just checking, is your thing working now?
I can hear you, but I think you logged me out of both.
Well, I can
Zooms.
see you. We can see you, and we can hear you. And if you're hearing me, that's perfect.
So much for new technology.
Yeah, I guess I can come over later to check it out. Wait, so you can hear me, right?
I can hear you.
Perfect. All right, let's go then. So next. So for people that didn't know, Millbrae used to have a police department called the Millbrae Police Department. In November of 2011, the city council disbanded the police department. At the time, there were issues within the Millbrae Police Department, including staffing cuts, concerns about the service quality, and it was also a difficult time financially for the city. So the city decided, in order to save approximately $1 million, to outsource our services to the county's sheriff's department. It follows in the steps of San Carlos. San Carlos actually uses the sheriff's department. It used the sheriff's department before Millbrae did. San Carlos had a very old police department. They disbanded their police department and contracted with the sheriff's department. Other cities like Half Moon Bay also contract with the sheriff's department. And this was all following proposals to cut costs. So the city was trying to do more with less. And there were also proposals to consolidate with San Bruno Police Department to potentially share officers, share a chief. And I know that this has always been a sort of point of contention because at the time, some notable community figures, including current Councilman Wayne Lee, actually opposed disbanding the police department for fears that the service would not be as good, the response times might fall, and at the time there was even a parcel tax proposed to fund the police department in Millbrae and to not outsource to the sheriff's department. But anyways, we're almost 10 years later. We've used the sheriff's department for quite a long time now. I know there are existing concerns about the quality of service we've been receiving, and that's what we hope to go more in depth about today. Ann, you got any thoughts about that?
I apologize to everyone on the call. I would only say that have been here with the old department and the new department. And I do work closely with Chief Kunkel on a number of things that we never had before the Sheriff's Department, that I find them very easy to work with.
Okay, cool. So, okay, let me see here. Next. Okay, oh, so, okay, we're gonna come back to, I guess, the Sheriff's Department when we get to the police accountability. Let's talk about street safety. Millbrae's street safety concerns have gone unaddressed for a really long time. That's going to be speeding on our major roads like Helen, Millbrae, parts of Larkspur, up on Skyline. We have distracted drivers and pedestrians. We have school zones that need attention because we have more and more kids walking to school, biking to school. We also have more people, especially during COVID. We've seen that people like to take their bikes. We're thinking about ways to connect the reservoir trails down to our Bayshore Trail. And as people get out more and there's more people on the roads, whether that's pedestrians, cars, or bicyclists, we need to find ways to make sure that everybody can enjoy the roads and do it safely. And feel free to jump in, okay? Because I don't want to just be talking the whole time.
I hesitate because of the echo.
If you keep your phone muted, is fine.
I will just kind of sit tight and listen to everyone and then try to do some explanations of things that might be more visible to someone who's wearing an elected official's hat than to the general public, and how we can improve that.
Okay. By the way, there's no echo if you keep the microphone is on your computer and the
microphone is off.
Microphone is off on your phone. So, all right, cool. So this was a chart from 2019, late last year, and let me move this out of the way. So if you look at the, do I have a pen? Oh, perfect. Pen, marker, awesome. Okay. Oh, let me see here. Okay, perfect. So you can see these markings here. This would be Millbrae Avenue. You see that anywhere marked with orange was where the community expressed concerns regarding speeding. Ashton here. This is, I think this is Taylor. This is the upper part of Helen. I know that, you know, the speeding concerns on Helen don't just stop. I think this is, you know, I think the lower part of Helen also has similar concerns. We have Ridgewood, Lomita, and up and down Broadway. So that would be speeding. There's cut-through traffic concerns. So cut-through traffic is where, for example, someone on 280 from here, in order to get to the airport, which is here, they cut through one of our neighborhoods. And these people, they drive super fast. They don't stop at the stop signs. They might be in a rush, and it leads to dangerous situations. We see a few turning issues. So turning issues are where people are making U-turns, and that might be unsafe because of the width of the streets. We also see just unsafe walking and biking. So we see that around the school zones, like this is Taylor here. We see Mills High School. We see walking up and down Millbrae Avenue, including parts where there aren't sidewalks. And you see over here, you have near the Meadows School, some issues there as well. So I think from what we see here, the issues have more or less been identified. And the solutions have more or less been identified as well. So on the next slide, you'll see the city actually hired a few consultants, and they outlined 3 tiers worth of solutions. Each tier is progressively more complex. Each tier is progressively more expensive to implement. So on this tier here, you see, this is the cheapest stuff. This is the easiest thing that we can implement, right? So we can add additional paint in the road. We can add these signs that you sometimes see on Helen already. You see more painting on the ground, signage. Dots are the little dots that they paste onto the road. Some people call it braille on the road, so that when you're driving over it, it makes noise and reminds you to slow down. We have increased police presence. We have temporary traffic measures, like putting in a temporary traffic circle. Lawn signs people like to use a lot. We have painting. So this is level 1. This is stuff that wouldn't take a lot of surveying, wouldn't need a lot of planning, just something we can do to immediately see results. This is level 2. Oh, so sorry. This is level 2. So the most applicable would probably be like a speed feedback sign. So this will be permanent. We have flashing lights. We have road diets. So people might have seen this on Richmond. Sort of from Magnolia all the way up, they added these bike lanes. The city, I think, got grant money and essentially made the road more narrow, added more paint, added bike lanes, added separate areas for parallel parking. So that's called a road diet because you're making the road skinnier. There's things like temporary speed bumps. You have these bollers you can install, traffic circles, again, a very temporary traffic circle here. And you have these chicanes. Chicanes are anywhere where the road slightly curves. So you can, again, make the road more narrow, get people to slow down. And then we have level 3 solutions. So there's a lot more here, but these are more technical and they are more expensive because they involve engineering. They involve changing the flow of traffic completely and forever and permanently. So you see pretty interesting issues like, for example, these right here where you can change the crossing to be more narrow. This encourages cars to slow down. We have what's called a choker right here. So this is where, again, making the road more narrow, getting people to be more careful. Pedestrian refuge. This is where you have a wide street and in the middle you can add an island for pedestrians to stand on. Again, gets cars to slow down. Here you can see the speed cushions. Here you have the speed cushions. And this is good because it actually serves to slow down passenger traffic, but things like fire engines and buses, they can still go around them without interruption because their wheelbases are wider than cars. So their wheels would go here. And you have cities like San Mateo using this to deliver slower traffic, but without a concern about hindering emergency services like ambulances and fire trucks. So this is actually a nice idea. And we also have partial closures. So partial closures, like you see here, this just basically reduces the flow of traffic, ensures that traffic becomes more local. People aren't using our streets as cut-through streets, and it just reduces overall traffic flow. Raised intersections, so this is basically a really big speed bump, makes the crossing makes the whole crossing a speed bump. So yeah, these are just some ideas, and I think Anne and I are really interested in finding ways on which how we can get these things on the city's desk, on the agenda, and just vote for these things. A lot of this has been delayed by COVID, and I think we need to move on it quickly because a lot of this stuff takes time. And what we understand now with the Sheriff's Department is that we may not have the budget for enforcement. So we need to think about permanent ways on which how we can discourage the bad driving to begin with, on how we can make the street safer without a police officer being out there all day long writing tickets. So these are the permanent, cost-effective solutions that we can use. Anne, you have to unmute your computer microphone.
I would only add that Yo-Yo's pretty much got it. A lot of the things like bulb outs are an attempt to give pedestrians a chance to cross the street. If you all think of our Millbrae Avenue, we have the widest Millbrae Avenue in its entire length. And that means if you're trying to cross the street, it is more dangerous for you than in other parts of El Camino and other communities because you don't have that distance to cross. So bulb outs will give you less time. Having that space in the middle also helps give a pedestrian a safe place to stay on there. And there's much work. The city, I know some of you because I recognize your names. I don't know if that's Bill or Janet Fogarty on the call. I believe, Bill, you were at least one of the workshops for the traffic calming workshops. Staff had been working on the report, and this was to come to council, and then COVID hit. So I completely agree with Yo-Yo saying that we're now 6 months into it. It is still impacting staff. Every time they change a health rule, the city has to change a related ordinance. So there's still a great deal of work on staff that's new and different, but we need to be moving back to getting business back to normal and getting in these traffic calming measures in here, which affect all the neighborhoods too.
Yeah, I think we.
Do we want, Yo-Yo, did you want to break this down and hear from our attendees about this?
Absolutely. I mean, if anyone, Joe, sorry, I can't see all the cameras, so feel free to just unmute and
But
talk.
I can see them if they raise their hands. If you click on participants and then there's a raise hand, I can see you on my screen now.
Oh, okay, cool. Joe?
So I'm just wondering, Ann, what happened with the consultant that the city had hired to work on that program? I thought that the meetings were really helpful, and it seemed like they had a lot of really solid ideas. Is the consultant still on board with the city, or has that been terminated? What's the status?
I believe the consultant is still on board, and I hadn't realized that the city had posted more information on the website till Yo-Yo and I were practicing or preparing for today, and he pulled a lot of this off the city's website. I think what's happened is Public Works has been diverted to working on outside dining and how do we maintain social distancing right now, and we need to get them back online there. On the good news side, whereas the city has had a hiring freeze in place since February, we are going to hire a new community development director, which means we can get some of our public works staff that are working in community development back to Public Works and start working back on these projects. But it's a good question. To my knowledge, we haven't gotten rid of them and we haven't gotten the final report. We were so close, Joe, so close. And I know we're all frustrated with that. I'm frustrated with that.
Is this something that the city has to fund itself, or are there like other like countywide transportation funds that could help to pay for some of these things?
There are, and then some of those funds, like the Measure A funds or the Measure K funds, that were both ballot measures, so all of us voted on those. They are to a large degree brought to cities by a per capita rate. So the city, for example, just received money from, I think it was Measure A funds. And I know that the city manager and I were talking about those because we're getting less money from that than Hillsborough is, because that particular pile of money comes to city based on the number of miles in your city. And believe it or not, Hillsborough apparently has more miles of road than we do. So there are these really weird formulas out there that really need to be looked at in terms of, is the money really going to where the need is? So yes and no. The other thing is, until we have these plans fully signed off by the city, it is more complicated to apply for grant funds. And then the next trick is to make sure that every project we apply for is shovel ready. So you'll hear that term if you listen to council meetings. I can tell you, being on the County Bike Pedestrian Committee, that historically they have funded projects that claimed to be shovel ready. And 5 years later, we just gave South San Francisco another extension. But that money 5 years ago could have gone to a city that really was shovel ready. So all of the grant programs are tightening up in, if we're going to give your city money, we want to see them actually happen. So in Millbrae's case, what you're going to see starting, did we vote on it? We voted on it. We approved it. You're going to start seeing a second grant of almost $300,000 matched by the city to make bicycle and pedestrian improvements from the train station up Murchison to Magnolia to the Spur, over Ashton, over Millbrae Avenue, and over Hillcrest, so that people can get to Taylor Middle School down to the train station in a much more safe fashion. And that's a grant fund. So you're going to see some things happening even as COVID has slowed us down a little bit. But we did approve that, and to me, that's exciting. At Hillcrest, right when you're coming down the steepest part of the hill, there's going to be some bulb outs, some new painting, that yellow flashing sign that warns drivers that they're going too fast, and we'll be able to get everybody walking the spur trail across Hillcrest in a much safer fashion.
Yeah, I'd also like to see just more representation again from the non-driving public. You know, the things that you see on this map are, I mean, a lot of it really is driving. Speeding is driving, running stop signs is driving. I think we should have, if the consultants come back, there should be way more emphasis on, hey, like there is a shift right now in the sort of road users we have. How can we make sure the areas, especially around the schools and the parks and places where people recreate, where can we make significant improvements there? And I think the reality of it is that we won't be able to make improvements in all these areas on the map. But I think there's going to be prioritization that happens. And even though the consultants that were hired can only do so much to advise, it's going to be down to the city to bring in all the stakeholders and really determine what exactly needs our first priority, second priority, so on and so forth. And I know that for this study, according to their website, only 45 people participated, you know, in a city of 20,000. I'd like to see way more outreach. And, you know, we almost have like 30 people on this call alone. I mean, I just want to find ways in which we can involve more people, because I know this is such an important issue to everybody. And it's when people speak up about the issues in their neighborhood that we can think about ways in which we can better improve the road and traffic situation around there.
So if I can add on to what Yo-Yo said, to me, 45 people is actually really good turnout. The traffic calming workshops, well, it's just a reality. It is really hard to get the people of Millbrae to turn out for things, with the exception of maybe TOD2, the gateway at Millbrae Station. Plenty of people came out, and then a good neighborhood group came out for the Sarah Station project, which High Speed Rail has put on hold. However, if there's a good thing about COVID-19, learning how we might be able to get comments from the public who are at home taking care of their kids during a 7 o'clock council meeting, that's an improvement. I think we can take some lessons learned from COVID on how to improve transparency and access for the public who can't physically come to these meetings. I would also say that we have a bike pedestrian committee. It is a subset of 2 of our Park and Rec commissioners, and they meet the hour prior to a Park and Rec meeting. But it would be really terrific if we had people who were walkers. And by walkers, it could mean people who are visually impaired and do not drive and therefore get everywhere by walking. They have a different perspective of what it's like to walk on our sidewalks. And we actually have someone in my neighborhood that her daughter is blind, and I've watched how drivers are horrible to people with a white cane when they're trying to cross the street, almost kind of bumping them out of a sidewalk. But the other things, if you are visually impaired, a mailbox on a street, on a sidewalk can be dangerous. Any kind of obstruction on a sidewalk can be very dangerous. So it would be great if we could get people who are big walkers onto and to be regular attendees of our bike pedestrian committee. I'd love to get someone representing only the walking community onto our bike pedestrian committee to bring in that very good perspective. We also have 2 other plans coming up. So if the public cares about this, it'll be the active transportation plan, which we got the draft back. It was very generic. It wasn't specific to Millbrae, our extra wide El Camino, our very hilly, curvy environment. And then we have the general plan. Both of those are additional places where we'll be diving into what's called circulation in the general plan, and then the active transportation plan. And we need the public. We need you to speak up, and the city needs to do a better job of allowing people who have to be at home at night to be able to participate.
Yeah, I agree. I think COVID creates opportunities, and you know, the participation can be, for lack of a better word, dumbed down to the most basic thing possible, just a form. Let us know where you live and what the issue is. And if we can get the feedback that way without making people go to a workshop that might last for hours, that's a great way to get people involved. Does anyone else?
One other thing that I learned from people who live in our neighborhoods that have the curvy sidewalk. So Anita, around Meadow Glen neighborhood, is when cars park up on the sidewalk so that they're preventing their cars from getting hit. A couple of people actually are wheelchair bound and they can't get their wheelchair on the sidewalk then, and they have to go out into the street. So we have some teaching to our residents. I understand protecting our cars, but if that keeps people out into the street, that's not a good solution, and we have to work on better solutions.
Well, you know, the rolled curbs, that's also another thing. I think like sometimes the logic doesn't add up, because people say, well, I'm parking onto the sidewalk because the streets are so dangerous for my mirrors. And I only have to think, well, when you're blocking the sidewalk, then does that mean the pedestrians should be walking into that very dangerous street in order to go around your vehicle? So yeah, Janet said, how about someone from the schools who have school children walking, you know, in terms of getting people involved regarding, you know, stakeholders involved. And yeah, of course. I mean, I know that like the parents are the most concerned regarding the speeding vehicles around here. We should have representatives from the community who have firsthand experience with the traffic issues to provide their input.
And Janet, that is an excellent idea. Maybe the Bike Pedestrian Committee needs a school representative. We haven't had, they have these things called Safe Routes to School. It's another program, and they do walk audits. And the last walk audit in Millbrae was in 2011. We haven't qualified for the funding, but basically there's a professional circulation consultant, and the grants cover this person to come in. They invite the community and they walk a neighborhood the way a lot of kids will walk to school, and they identify all of the barriers. That can be something as simple as a big bush that's grown 10 feet tall on a corner, which blocks visibility of people on the sidewalk or people in the street. So those walk audits can be really important in identifying specific neighborhood issues that sometimes it's a fairly easy fix. Bring the shrub down, thin it out so that it improves visibility for everyone. And sadly, it's hard for Millbrae to qualify for those given our socioeconomic bracket in the city. And that's something we need to work on. Keep trying to be competitive with these grants.
So yeah, I think well, Katie, I'm just gonna mention what Katie said and then we'll move right on, because Karen is right. We do need we have stuff to talk about. Keep on time. But Katie mentioned the Millbrae Ashton intersection, which is right here. They just put in a stop sign at I forgot what street this was. This one that
Sequoia.
Oh yeah, Sequoia. And I'm sure, you know, the traffic warrant was before the council the other week. This whole area, and like I said, when this issue, if this issue comes back after the election, and if I'm so elected, and I'm sure Ann is thinking the same, I would want to just have the consultants or the council, whoever it may be, reach back out to the people, because I think even though this is a good start, we haven't identified all the issues. There are many more issues to be pointed out, and just again, bring this issue back to the people, because it is something that is really important. And just based on the reactions to this PowerPoint, I think a lot of people are seeing this for the first time when they shouldn't have. This should be all over next door. This should be a crowdsourced information gathering session. And I'd like to do better when it comes to working with the public on such an important issue.
The corner of Millbrae Avenue and Ashton is part of the grant work that's physically starting in the fall. So you're going to see some bulb outs there, and quite a bit of work in that intersection, which is scary as anything intersection.
Right. Marin Morris also said that if speeding was slowed down, then cars would feel comfortable parking on the streets, you know, blocking the sidewalks. And to that, I'd respond, you know, that's what we would have parking enforcement for. You know, we'd have parking enforcement to make sure they don't park on the sidewalks. So even as we're slowing traffic, we also need to make sure that people still follow the parking rules. And Maren also mentioned the temporary speed bumps. And yeah, you know, a lot of these things we can try temporarily. I know Millbrae Public Works at the top of Helen, they tried put, you know, like some of the painting stripes, the traffic stripes that they use are actually just tape. They tape and they heat gun it on. And that's how you can test if something works before we make it permanent and spend the money on it. But yes, like I said, this has to be revisited. I think we have to do better than 45 people. And, you know, this is a top priority for us. All right, anyways, we're gonna move on because we have more topics to cover. So neighborhood safety, all right. So I think when Ann and I were talking earlier today, we have an influx of new residents. We have a change in demographics. None of these are negative things, by the way. This is just the reality of Millbrae. And I think more and more people don't know their neighbors. And I want to see if anyone has ideas about increasing neighborhood cohesion. How can we bring people closer together, look out for each other? And that ties into crime prevention, because until we have a non-baseline police service, we need to think about ways to be smart about deterring crime to begin with. That's not us saying that, well, if you're not careful, you deserve crime. That's simply saying, in the time we live in, as unfortunate as it is, we need to do common sense things like locking our doors, installing floodlights, you know, not leaving valuables in plain sight, things like that. We also want to go over disaster preparedness and planning. I think Ann has things to say about how we can better plan and be prepared for example, a fire or major earthquake. I also wanted to touch upon neighborhood watch, whether or not introducing that to Millbrae may be advantageous or could also backfire. Yeah, awareness. It just all comes down to increasing awareness, because I think to some extent, we have to look out for ourselves. And yeah, we'll talk about ways to do that. So Ann? Oh yeah, sorry, let me, one more slide, sorry. This is the crime map of Millbrae. So you can see, so this looks familiar, right? This is the airport here. This is In-N-Out here. This is Broadway. So you see a lot of our, by the way, I've narrowed the crime map. So this does not include all crimes. There are too many crimes to list on one graphic. But as you can see here, this is robbery, assault, burglary, larceny, theft. So that's theft of personal property, and attempted burglary as well. So yeah, I know that there's been a lot of property crime up in the Meadows area here. There's a lot of property crime in the areas near our freeways. So you can sort of see that here. And then there's a lot of issues in downtown. I mean, look at how heavy downtown is. Downtown has a lot of car break-ins. It has, you know, shoplifting. People have their money stolen from them. And that has also been a concern sort of a little bit more north on El Camino. So you can see that around here. There's a heat wave right here too. That's where we had the recent armed robbery as well. So I know this has been a concern for people too. We have to do better than this. And we have to be more serious, because I think the reality of it is we're not patrolling the streets enough. These crimes are, this city is being targeted by gangs, by organized gangs who know exactly what they're doing. In San Bruno, they're stealing catalytic converters. Down here, they're breaking into homes, smashing cars. I heard they're stealing wheels. And that's because they know we don't have a properly staffed law enforcement division. Our police are more responsive than they are proactive, reactive than they are proactive. And I just keep asking myself, you know, 2 years ago, I was talking about license plate readers. You know, I think that's one of the most immediate things we can do to reduce crime. When people get off of 280 or 101, we have license plate readers like the city of San Mateo uses. And that allows the police department or the sheriff's department to see who's coming into town. And for example, if someone's driving into town with a stolen vehicle, then that could immediately alert law enforcement officers that there's somebody up to no good in this city. And that's a cost-effective way and a very high-tech way to not only deter crime, but to actively fight crime in the city.
So this is where, just look at the data here. This is covering 2018, 19, and half of 2020. It is true that our proximity to freeways have increased the amount of crime, opportunistic crime. People come in on the freeways or they come in on BART. That's that heavy shadow that you see along El Camino Real. They do their crime, they hop back on BART, they hop back on the train, or they actually, now we know that they are renting really nice cars, so they blend in with the neighborhood, case the neighborhood, and then break into them. And the really sad and frustrating thing is we have been talking as a city about license plate readers for 2 years. We have applied for the permit. That was back last fall. The chief was told back last fall it would take 6 months to get a permit for them, and then COVID hit. So the license plate readers can help a great deal. I would say that we're not the only city being targeted. Any of the cities up and down the peninsula with easy access to the freeway have been targeted. You know, from Woodside and Portola Valley on up to us. We have the double whammy of being the end of a train station where BART has not done what it should have done, which is have a police officer there. And I know that one of our fellow candidates for city council has been very vocal on that, and I agree. BART needs to have a police substation at BART, and they need to man it, and they need to start handling the crime that comes on and off the BART station.
I'd also add to that. Yeah, I agree with our fellow candidate about BART's concerns. You know, BART has neglected its responsibilities completely to protect the community. Millbrae has been used as an end-of-line dump, and you know, we can't have that. And not only is the Millbrae station totally understaffed, but that law enforcement presence just isn't there. You can't have this multimodal station and not even have a dedicated officer to it. But also, I just want to make sure that, because sometimes I hear from the public this, I think, they don't split the concerns regarding BART with the rest of the crimes. You know, the transient population coming off of BART isn't walking up to Tioga up Helen and breaking into homes there. You know, we really have to target, you know, the majority of the crimes in Millbrae are committed by people who come in from out of town. And like Ann said, whether in stolen cars, rented cars, or just their own cars, they're coming in late at night and they are preying on unsuspecting people. And again, I think the best way to react to this is first get the high-tech solutions, but also you just have to have boots on the ground. You have to have more of a presence. You have to have patrols in the downtown. Where's the walking sheriff's deputy we've been talking about for the longest time downtown? You know, as a business owner, I would like to see the police walking downtown, checking in with the merchants, ensuring safety that way. Yeah, just
Reading from Joe and Sherry Terezi, how do Millbrae crime statistics compare? We're still considered a very low crime community. Even with the influx of crimes based on COVID and the homeless population, and frankly, the gangs that are operating around In-N-Out Burger, they can break into a car in less than 7 seconds. And they grab the computers and all these people who are getting something to eat before going to SFO to fly out someplace, they're being targeted for that. And I just read here somebody about Prop 47, and yes, indeed, that has increased the problem because they know that most of these crimes are misdemeanors. And our police department, our police bureau, they're as frustrated with that as we are on that. It's one of those trying to make things less targeted. If we get into defunding the police issues, how do you stop targeting perhaps a certain race? You decriminalize certain activities, but there's an impact. And these burglaries can be directly linked to Prop 47.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so going back a little bit to crime prevention, I think, you know, we are stuck between a rock and a hard place, right? We have all these measures, and you can agree or disagree, but there's, you know, Prop 47. We have a sheriff's department, which is bare bones, right? Like, they are providing the minimal service possible to still be called law enforcement. And I'm not saying that's the law enforcement officer's fault. That's our fault when it comes to city government. And until the day comes when we have just this crime-free city, I want to see how we can work with the community on crime prevention. So that's, for example, working with the sheriff's department to increase our, you know, the sheriff's department was doing the surveillance camera registry. I want to see how we can improve that. I want to see if the city can assist people with installing surveillance systems, or, you know, for example, doing house checkups, or, you know, doing reminders to keep people's cars locked. We just need to take common sense measures to deter people from coming into Millbrae in the first place. And I don't know if you have any thoughts about that. I know we were talking about that earlier.
No, I think we can do more education on that. It becomes a little bit of our own personal, are we doing our own things? I would love to see a program that we encourage more motion sensors lighting, because lighting can deter crime. But we also have a lot of people who are elderly and maybe house rich and can't afford that. So if we can identify some areas, but that would bring us to neighborhood watch. If we had stronger neighborhoods and we were looking out for each other, then together as a community, we can help strengthen ourselves. With the cameras, I just read someone's comment about putting cameras downtown. I think that adding cameras downtown, you know, we haven't actually talked about adding cameras downtown, but that is definitely something to bring up.
Well, I mean, you have to have a law enforcement officer watching the cameras. You know, that's the issue. I mean, you know, we just have to have all these sources. You know, like so before I forget, never mind, I already forgot.
Yo, I would only tell you that the thing with the cameras, our police department is actually really high catch the bad guy numbers. And maybe the city needs to do a better job of publishing it. Those cameras, plus the cameras that people have put up in their homes, are really good at helping us collect the data and track the criminal. Sadly, I don't know if that always means that the burglar products, items get back to the resident. They don't report that back to us at our level, but I think we can do more of that. And given that we do have an increase in crime along Broadway and along El Camino, maybe the cameras are an issue.
I remember now, Prop 47. Just a quick blurb about it. You know, I think the intention of Prop 47 is overall good. It was to, you know, reduce the prison population. It was to give people second chances. But Prop 47 also was just totally bungled when you have reports out of San Francisco and the rest of the state where you have these criminals. They travel to California in order to commit shoplifting. You know, they have these gang robberies now, you know, of the stores and the malls, because they know that the police won't care about it. You also have people who are just released into jail, who go to jail, and then they're released on Prop 47. And then, you know, the very same night they're back out there, and it's just a revolving door. And I heard, I don't know if it was during COVID or something. I think some guy was arrested like 12 times in the week. And the only thing they could do was just keep releasing him because of Prop 47, because of some issue with cash bail. So, you know, whatever social measures we have for reducing prison population, it still has to be pragmatic, and it has to have public safety in its interest first.
I would only add, it's not that the police don't care. They care a great deal.
No, I know. I'm saying that they have their hands tied. They're powerless here.
And I'm just reading from Katie. Sadly, some of the work you cross that line into, are you increasing racial profiling, or
Oh, Katie's referencing Joe's question regarding Neighborhood Watch. By the way, everyone's welcome to unmute their microphone and just interrupt us, seriously. Neighborhood Watch, there's good aspects to it, and we already have a de facto Neighborhood Watch going on Nextdoor. On Nextdoor, people like to ask their neighborhood, hey, have you seen this white Chevy driving around? I haven't seen it lately. Or there's been a car parked here for a long time. Who does it belong to? So we have a quasi like Neighborhood Watch going already. The bad part about Neighborhood Watch is the fact that there are people in this community who think that they're the police and they want to pursue some sort of vigilante justice. And that's what we want to avoid. I'm not saying that's going to happen in Millbrae, but look at what happened with Ahmaud Arbery. He was taking a jog around the neighborhood and two men came after him with rifles and shot him dead because they were taking the law into their own hands. They suspected that he burglarized a house that was under construction without any proof. And the man gave up his life for that. You look at, what's that guy's name? George Zimmerman and Trayvon Martin. That was an example of Neighborhood Watch gone bad. Yes, there's probably thousands and tens of thousands of examples where Neighborhood Watch has gone well. But again, if we just move past the program of Neighborhood Watch, I'm thinking like, how do we just bring neighborhoods closer together? I think, Anne, you wanted to talk about like neighborhood barbecues, neighborhood get-togethers, directories, things like that.
If we put COVID aside for right now, some of the neighborhood watches, it ties in, Joe, you asked this question with CERT, getting our neighborhoods to know each other, know which households might need help if we have to do an evacuation due to fire, or right now, which of our seniors or people with high risk for COVID are isolated at home. Neighborhood Watch can help with that. And our police chief, Paul Kunkel, has been very active in working. I will say that the Asian community, the Millbrae Cultural Committee, has really been trying to reach out to our Asian community to encourage them to create neighborhood watches. But think back a few years ago when we used to have the community-wide garage sale, or sometimes other cities, I don't think I've ever seen it done here, where they actually close down a couple of streets and everybody can come out and have a block party. All of those ideas are a way to get to know each other, kind of know who's in the neighborhood. There is the downside. We had a person living with us for a little over a year. He had been a homeless person. He was helping me remodel. He happened to be a Black man. And he told me one day how many times he got stopped between the bus station and our house. So I called the police department and said, Ed lives, well, eventually Ed then lived with us, but Ed used to live at a homeless shelter and then come and help us work here. And that was my eye-opening, that if you were a person of color or a Black person of color, you might get stopped by our police officers. On one side, you can say, well, we don't have that many Black people here, so why would you have them walking through the neighborhood? And even that statement sounds horrible. But Neighborhood Watch can mean, oh yeah, we've got all kinds of community of colors living in here. And if there's something suspicious, let's look for certain behaviors, not necessarily what color someone is.
We can, I'm going to move on from this because just time-wise, but Joe, he asked if we could do a straw poll of how many people feel that crime is a top priority for Millbrae residents and that it is not a top priority for him. Yeah, I mean, I just think crime, when it happens to the, we can move rankings of issues up and down, but I think safety, generally speaking, I would imagine, is a top priority for many, many people. And especially for those who, Anne, sorry.
The one way to do a straw poll, just to show, so as we learn how to use this tool, is if you open up and go into Screen Guide, and everybody who would put safety or crime as one of your top priorities, just raise your hand.
Oh, is that how I do it? Oh.
And you can get an idea of a straw poll right there if you think that crime, so we've got a couple right there, another one there. Usually, and believe it or not, the #1 role of a council person is to keep you all safe. And that's why when you look at the budget, more money goes into safety, because that's our #1 goal. Now, safety might be make sure we can evacuate you in the event of a fire, but
yes,
yeah.
I think we'll come back to disaster preparedness in a second. But for me, I think if you think about what local governments are sort of most in charge of, one of them is how safe is it, how clean is it, and maybe like how good are our schools. And we have such a grasp on keeping people safe at the local level. That's why, for me, public safety is, if not my #1 priority, it's one of my top 3. Crime prevention, and because I know how it feels to have stuff stolen from you. You know, like I was in Mexico on Christmas, and somebody came up to me in a motorbike and grabbed my iPhone, brand new iPhone, out of my hand. And I was just standing there. I felt so powerless. I'm just like, wow, this, that's the first time I was a victim of a property crime. But then you have people in Millbrae, up in Meadows, whose homes have been invaded, and I don't want to make it sound like I'm fear mongering, but this is happening to Millbrae residents, and it's not normal. And people's losses are severe, whether it's a sentimental loss, a physical loss, or just a loss of peace and tranquility.
Yo-Yo?
Yes.
Sorry for interrupting. We've got a question.
Right.
Janet, go ahead and unmute yourself, and then Chris Shuey.
No, Janet and Chris were raising their hands to the previous question that you asked me. Right?
Oh, okay. So you were doing it that way.
Yeah. Okay. Next. Okay. Police accountability. Okay. So we're finally here. So I guess first we can talk about the nationwide conversation. So we know that following the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis, there has been a national conversation regarding not only just the way the police work in our community, but further than that, how we fund the police, the role that the police has in our community, and sort of how we keep the police accountable. Because after all, they do work for the community, they work for us, the taxpayer, and they work to keep us safe. So how can we support them, but at the same time make sure that they're supporting us in the right way back? So one of the sort of overarching set of principles that was talked about was the so-called 8 can't wait proposals. And you can see right here, here's the 8 proposals that they talked about. So this was big: banning chokeholds and strangleholds. When you're arresting a suspect, you can't grab them by the neck. This cuts off their circulation, increases risk of death, and is generally an ineffective police tactic. There's requires de-escalation. So that's training officers how to de-escalate the situation, do crisis management. There's requiring warning before shooting, requires officers to exhaust all alternatives before shooting. So that would be, for example, using less lethal beanbag rounds, tasers, using a canine, and just all sorts of other methods before using deadly force. There's a duty to intervene. What this means is if one officer sees another officer, for example, using a prohibited tactic or doing something wrong, then that officer actually has a legal or a duty-related obligation to file a report to speak up. Banning shooting at moving vehicles. This has been proven to be an ineffective way to stop suspects. That shooting at a moving vehicle is actually more dangerous to the general public than it is to helping, accomplish the goal of stopping a suspect. And it should be banned. There's a use of force continuum. This is a defined process as part of the officer's training to make sure that that force is used as appropriate, as necessary, and proportional to every situation. And then it also requires comprehensive reporting. So this is this is properly documenting situations. This is making sure that there's honesty in reporting, that we're reporting, the officers are reporting when force is being used, so we can measure trends. We can see if certain races or certain groups of people are subject to use of force compared to others. Let me move on to the next slide. So this was prepared by the sheriff's department in response to the George Floyd protests. And what I'd say is that I think us being in San Mateo County, we always demand more. This is a really good start. I think the San Mateo County sheriffs proactively responding, showing that they are aware of these requirements, that they do want to be accountable players and accountable officers. This is something I support. And I don't know if you have any thoughts about 8 Can't Wait. Otherwise, I want to move on to the next slide.
No, definitely support it. Yo-Yo, just be aware that there's a number of questions about how the Sheriff's Department allocates time. So make sure that we're allowing time to get to these questions.
Okay, let's get to that at the end of the next slide. Here we go. Okay. So defunding the police. I put that in quotes because I don't want anybody to get the wrong idea. And the one that says Y next to it, I'll talk about. The ones that say A, I think Anne will go into. Defunding the police is so much more than defunding the police. And just from the get-go, I mean, I don't support defunding the police in Millbrae. I don't think we can defund any further without putting the community at risk. But when you hear that phrase, it's most often used in large cities: Los Angeles, Baltimore, Minneapolis, Seattle, San Francisco. And you look at, this is, for example, the Baltimore's general funds based on their agency. You look at police, and they dedicate over $500 million to their police. The Los Angeles Police Department budget is over $1 billion a year. And for everything else, you see, for example, health, 41 million, the parks, 44 million, housing, homeless services, employment development. I think what people are saying is that after some extent, you can't just keep throwing money at the police to make our communities more safe. You will have diminishing returns. It's like eating more and more chocolate. You know, it's great for the first few bars, but then as you keep eating more chocolate, you know, it gets less and less tasty, and it's less and less effective at giving you satisfaction. And that's the same thing for police. And I think what these people who are advocating for so-called defunding the police, what they're actually trying to say is, can we take some of the budget from the police and reinvest that money, which is a limited pool of public tax revenue, into these other services that we find important? For example, reducing homelessness, to advance community health, to make more open spaces, to fix our roads, to improve public transport. So it just happens to be that in city budgets, you have to take the money from somewhere. And the reason why the police have been targeted is that they are traditionally overfunded, right? The police are traditionally, you know, the police make hundreds of thousands of dollars in overtime. They have just crazy amounts of equipment. So I think that's where that phrase comes from. And I just wanted to put that understanding out there because I think each city is different. It's not very applicable in Millbrae, where we already don't have a police department. We're already running on bare bones. But yeah, just want to put that out there. And yeah, that's the theory versus the reality part of it. Because no politician, well, I wouldn't say no politician, but Ann and I would not ever advocate for reducing a public safety budget in order to, if it meant compromising public safety. You know, we're going to think about ways to increase funding to the programs that have been underfunded, like our social services, like our services focused on the homeless or mental health or keeping our city clean. And through that, we're going to enhance public safety. So we're going to take over some of the responsibilities that may not be as appropriate for the police to take on. For example, you know, should the police be responding to mental health calls? Or perhaps should a trained nurse or a social worker be responding? That's one of the more popular examples of how we can more appropriately invest in keeping the community safe and not meeting every situation with law enforcement, because not every situation has to be met with law enforcement. So yeah, Anne, if you want to talk about social services.
Well, Here's the problem. Our budget, where a portion of the budget goes to the Sheriff's Department. I see all the questions on how do we allocate our sheriffs, and I'll get to that. But the Sheriff's Department does have a psychological emergency response team, a PERT team. So that question of do we have fewer or more police officers on the street, we have 4 officers at any one time here in Millbrae, mostly on the street. They are very rarely in the police department down at City Hall. If there's an episode that might need psychological response, in theory, the PERT team would be called out. Now, why that did not happen for Schneider Okobi, I don't know. So my theory on that is the same way our fire officers, they might have an EMT training, emergency medical tech training, but now almost all of them are paramedics, or at least there's always paramedics on everything. It could mean that we need to beef up all of the sheriff's training so they all have that psychological emergency response team. However, the funding for social services is not a city budget item. It's a county budget item. So if we were, for example, reduce our Millbrae police force and hope that we're going to get county mental health workers up here, I'm not sold that that would actually happen. If I can see the data that says, okay, Millbrae, we know that you had a Black Lives Matter death by taser, and there have been changes in the types of taser. The county just approved purchasing new tasers that are supposed to be less dangerous. That was in the paper the last 2 weeks. Maybe those are steps in the right direction, but mental health is controlled by the county. And we as a city, along with San Bruno and Burlingame, we need to work together to make sure that the county is equally distributing those resources or distributing them where they are needed. And the other, I'll tell you that one of the frustrating things for our homeless population, if they're San Mateo County bound, and Janet Fogarty brought this up last time, if they recognize San Mateo County as their home, we have a hotel that we can put them up in, and we're giving them, we, the government, are giving them 3 meals a day. But if they're homeless from San Francisco who got here by the train or by BART, our officers do ask, would they like to move to San Mateo? Would they like to qualify for San Mateo? No, they prefer San Francisco because they get better benefits. And that leaves us with a homeless population that we can't put into a hotel because we wouldn't get reimbursed for them. So there's some issues that need to be straightened up. I don't serve on our council subcommittee on homeless, so I don't have all the specific information. And it's one of the reasons why I'm not overly fond of council subcommittees. 2 of us will have much more detailed information than the rest. And it makes it harder for us to see the whole big picture and how all the pieces fit. So I am all for more mental health solutions. I think if you look at the gang activity that we have that may come from the East Bay, some of them come as far away as Los Angeles too. They come up here, they target the Bay Area, they operate for 4 or 5 days, and then they go home. Now, are they there because they had fewer opportunities growing up? That's a long-term fix. We have to have equal opportunities for everybody, and that's bigger than our city police budget on that. But that's a societal thing that we're finally beginning to discuss, is to find all those barriers to equal opportunity. It's not going to be a quick fix. I'm not sure I answered your questions. Now, the questions about how are our officers spent? We do have a motorcycle officer whose main role is to serve on traffic calming. You may not see him, but he's out there because we do have over 50 miles of roads in Millbrae. So he is there. We have 2 other cars operating. If, for example, we had that burglary, when we had the burglary rash, the Sheriff's Department sent a whole burglary team. This is why I like being part of the Sheriff's Department. We get special teams. I'm not a football watcher, but you can think of it as a special team. If you're going to do a kick, you bring in the guys who are pros on kicking. If you're going to do defense or offense, you bring in the pros who really know that problem. And we've been able to use them, which is why our crime-solving numbers are really good. They bring in the burglar team. Chief Kunkel, our chief, is also the head of the transportation division of the Sheriff's Department. So we get a little bit extra, given that BART doesn't do their part. We're getting a little bit extra because of Paul Kunkel and our connection with the transportation division, which is different. I can't tell you how many hours they spend on things. I can tell you that once a year, the police department and the fire department do an annual report of what all their cars were, what were their percentage of time spent, and then we get updates periodically. And it's probably time to bring that back. Life seems so pushed together right now. I'm having a hard time remembering. I think they typically report to us in October because then we can build into the budget for the next year. It starts the budget process. But the city is also going through a change in how we do budget process, trying to get our policies in place ahead, what programs are working, what aren't, and then we set our budget, and the budget has to be approved by June every year. It's mandated.
You know, Anne, I think I think there just needs to be more information available, not just for those, like, you know, crime statistics should be way more clear. You know, I shouldn't have to have to submit a public records request in order to get these things. I hope that, you know, I hope that we get a little bit more high tech with that. And also, you know, even if, like, I'm sure these plans exist somewhere. I'm not on the council, so I'm probably not reading a lot of this, but what plans does the sheriff department have going forward? You know, we're going to have an increase in population. We're going to have, you know, the whole BART station area. I saw Marilyn here. She's talking about what needs to happen for BART to do its part. And yeah, they're really going to have to do their part when Millbrae becomes a busy station after Gateway, after Sarah Station, you know, all these developments.
Let's take BART aside, just to interrupt. Let's take BART aside because we're at 413 right now. There will be an increase in firefighters. There already is a ladder truck. Because Millbrae combined with Central County Fire, we have a ladder truck. There's plans on adding an additional ladder truck, which is what you need to handle taller buildings. The finances, the cost for those were built into what the developers have to pay for the Gateway project, as well as the Sarah Station project, which I'm again going to say is on hold because of high-speed rail. Please look at today's Daily Journal and yesterday's Cron, and we should have a discussion just on how transportation agencies have hurt Millbrae's economic development. But the increase in officers, deputies, and the increase in fire have been built into those projects. And every new development along El Camino Real has money set aside to increase our staffing levels for that.
Okay.
And then we get BART to build its substation there, and they put one of their officers, of which I believe they have 2, and they keep them up in Daly City and up into the city. They don't bring them down here. We have to be more vocal. Millbrae has got to learn to start standing up for itself. And I think we're doing that with Tom Williams as our city manager. We're becoming more proactive on saying enough is enough.
I think, I don't think anybody in this room thinks that if Ann and I were on council, we'd be unvocal. I mean, nobody knows me as a non-vocal person. We will hold BART accountable. We'll make sure that BART is, that everybody, whether it's a developer, whether it's any stakeholder, you know, they're going to be responsible for making sure that our community is safe. So anyways, we're going to move on. Last 15 minutes here.
First of all, social services counted by the staff. Yeah, caught Janet's question on social services.
Yes.
So we need to be working with Supervisor Pine to make sure we're there. I agree with you completely, Janet, on drug addictions. I wish actually, I can't be on another subcommittee. I'm stretched so thin, but I'd love to hear more from that. Let's talk about the police officer. I know Yo-Yo and I have a different opinion on this.
Yeah.
For Mills High School, they have an officer there. It is funded through the high school district. It happens to be a sheriff deputy. It is not, has nothing to do with the city of Millbrae and our sheriff's department. And the goal there is for the officers to kind of see where kids are getting into trouble and try to help them walk the right path. So for example, the Sheriff's Activity League, the Police Activity League in cities that have police departments, they try to find kids who seem to be struggling and try to help them get into that area. And I've done 2 projects in Millbrae with the Sheriff's Activity League, and these are kids who are high risk. They were having problems. They were failing in school and getting frustrated. And now they come to Millbrae events and they work with our little ones. And it's a great program that hopefully we can do more with. But I know that there's that perception that they're there to scare bad kids. And
Well,
that is not the purpose.
Ann and I have a respectful disagreement on this issue because I came out of Mills less than a decade ago and 6 years ago. And I can tell you that the perception from students was that the only reason they were there were to intimidate the kids and not to provide any type of mentorship or care. You know, maybe it was different at a middle school level when you mentioned the activities league or something. But I think that shows where the high school's priorities are. We don't have a mental health counselor on board, but we don't have a mental health counselor at the school, but instead we have a police officer who's stationed there all the time. So I'm just thinking, where's our priority? I'm not saying we can't have both. I'm just saying right now it seems like there's something missing there. Because look, school safety is a huge priority. And we can argue that having a deputy there is something that's useful for example, preventing, violence in schools or something. But oftentimes, these police officers, they sit there for 5 years, they're never going to deal with a major issue like a school shooting or something like that. They're going to be, I know at Mills, it was just for kids who brought a knife to school or brought marijuana to school or cigarettes or things like that. And I just want to see if we can, instead of introducing kids into a formalized justice system, criminal justice system that we know is broken at a young age, perhaps we can re-examine the necessity of having a police officer in the schools. And I don't know. I'm just telling you. I was never involved. I never spoke with the deputy at Mills. I just know that the perception was generally negative, and he was not an approachable person. People knew that the only people that went to go see him were people that had to go see him, and that he was there to also execute the law, to arrest kids. That for me is, it's. But
and at least 2 years ago, when I knew of a child being bullied where it was escalating, I did talk to the police officer at Mills. It was a little bit weird. It's like, well, I'm an advisor to her with my Lions hat on, and I'm a council member, and I didn't know what my duties were. So I did work through that. I'm reading through everybody's questions here. One of the hardest things for the public sometimes to understand is what power you have as a council member. And I know Robert's on the call and Janet's on the call, so they've had experience. City council members don't have a great deal of power over school districts. So, and when you knock on doors during election time, you get, well, I want you to improve the schools. Yeah, we all want good schools. It's good for all of us. It's good for society to have good schools. But we as elected officials don't have a lot of power. So I would, for everybody that wants to have that discussion of police presence on campus versus counselors and mental health and safe spaces and bullying spaces, that is a terrific discussion. And if we as a city can help with that, I think that's a great direction to go. I have been to the Rotarians do a big Mills and Cap football luncheon, and I have sat with the officer from Cappuccino. But I'm an adult and I'm an elected official, so my perspective was, wow, he's very approachable. Maybe from a child's perspective, a teenager's perspective, it's different, and we can work on that. It's just not something the city can have a lot of. So Katie, I saw that our 4 officers do not serve at the schools. They don't.
I just want to, again, clarify that we're not saying that we should have unarmed representatives deal with potentially violent situations. That's not what we're saying. What we're saying is that is law enforcement appropriate for the nonviolent crimes, like, for example, possessing drugs? Is that something where when a kid gets caught with that for the first time, we need to refer them to law enforcement and get them down this slippery slope? Or is that something where you do what you did 10 years ago, which was you call the parents, all right, you're suspended from school or warning or whatever, and there's no need for law enforcement there. I think in the spirit of providing mentorship to kids, because I still remember how I was like just a few years ago. I mean, I'm still young. I feel like I'm still learning. And some of my friends who might have been stupid back then and are smarter now, including me, I don't think any of us would have benefited from being referred to a so-called school resource officer. And by the way, like this ties into public safety, because when you talk about an issue like how can we prevent kids from becoming violent? How can we prevent kids from making rash decisions like buying a weapon and hurting others or hurting themselves? A lot of that, if not all of it, ties into mental health and about the opportunities that kids have to get help at school, especially in our middle and high school here. Yes, it is something that the school district is responsible for, but you know, like the people going to the schools are our residents. You know, we as a city government have a responsibility to make sure these resources are available. That certainly was not something that I felt like was available. I just talked to, that I felt like was available when I was at school there. I just talked to 2 Mills High School students today who are currently juniors there, and they told me that the general sentiment is rather negative amongst students when it comes to support for their mental health. And I think that having kids who are having children in our schools who feel like they're properly cared for and feel like they have access to the right resources, that's really important for me, because I think people are increasingly stressed with work. People are just not getting the type of help they need.
I'm reading Amy's comment. Amy, I'm sorry for your children there. That's, you know, it's hard enough growing up. So my heart goes out to you. I was talking to a parent today at one of the Black Lives Chalk events, and Millbrae was unique in the county, pretty unique, that the city council would meet with the Millbrae trustees, so Millbrae Elementary School, and Superintendent Kevin Scully from the high school district. And we would meet more or less quarterly and talk about issues, talk about what's happening with each area and where we might assist each other. Now, about a year and a half ago, that was turned into a council subcommittee, and it was no longer a public meeting. I have talked to the city manager about that. I don't like that. I like that it was a public meeting. It was at 7:30 in the morning on a Wednesday. So we did not get a lot of public there, but it was designed to fit into the academic world. But I would love to see that come back, where we have meetings with the leaders of our community, however that might be bridged, with the public invited. And if we need to move it to the evening so that more parents can participate, that way all of you can say, do we really need a police officer on campus? Do we need more mental health? Do we have those safe spaces for our kids?
Or both.
What
or
are
both. Or both. And like, this is not a zero-sum thing. We can have both a police officer on campus, yes, but he can be assisted in his work on keeping the school safe by having a properly trained counselor, right? You know.
So what I would do is, you know, as an election issue, I think they were trying to simplify the workload, and they made a council subcommittee of 2 instead of all 5 of us. And yet Millbrae, the people of Millbrae live, eat, and breathe their school. So it's important for us to mix and meet. I'm going to throw one more thing out there that came from this conversation earlier. Millbrae doesn't have somebody, not for a long, long time, if ever, serving on the Unified High School District Board of Trustees. So maybe it's time for somebody who really cares about these issues. Talk to us. Let's help you get ready to run for that office, and let's get somebody from Millbrae on that board.
Absolutely.
I would like to see more people from Millbrae serving on regional commissions. We have a woman here, well, Jean should know, it's a public commission, Jean Perry, who is on the Mental Health Commission for San Mateo County. Every time we can get somebody from Millbrae on these regional commissions, means that we're going to be better represented, and we might have a better chance of bringing dollars back into Millbrae if we need dollars to fix that problem. So I hats off to Jean, and we just need more people. And come and talk to me if you want to run for office. I view my role as an elected official. Should I win this election? I only got 4 more years. I'm done, termed out. My role is to develop the next set of leaders. So I want to help you guys become leaders. That's why I'm supporting Yo-Yo. I want to help Yo-Yo become the best leader he can. He's the next generation. He's our future.
And did we ever have joint school board and city council meetings here in Millbrae, other than that one time with TOD?
We had at 7:30 in the morning. They weren't televised, and believe it or not, no minutes were taken, which I do not understand how that could happen. Janet's on the call. I don't know if that happened when Janet was on council or Robert, but it doesn't mean yes. So Janet, great. That made us really unique in the county, because other cities say, oh, we never talk to our school boards. And yet we work so closely together. We share fields, we share sport facilities. Our seniors should have better access to classrooms in the elementary schools so that when we can gather again, they can work on projects and the socializing that we all need to have as human beings. It's a great way to do it. So Janet, hats off to you. So yay to you on that.
Yeah.
You need to bring it back. I would make that one of my issues. I bump heads with, I adore our city manager, but he also lets me bump heads with him. So you can have Tom, I really want this back, but it does take at least 3 council members then to vote for it to come back.
I kind of wish that more people like unmuted their mics and spoke. I'd love to hear people's voices. But yeah, we're coming to the last couple minutes here. You know, I don't know if anyone else has sort of a final, like, I know we haven't covered everything. You know, in preparation for this, we did go out and try to seek as much information as we can. But you know, we set the agenda relatively, we set the agenda about a week before. And, you know, we're going off of the knowledge we have and the knowledge we can source from other individuals. Obviously, Anne can't use certain resources that she has to campaign. And there are other individuals who may not be able to assist us with certain information because it's not readily available. So I just like to say that that we are doing our best, and we will keep getting better with these town halls. Our goal is to, I think, you know, the chat is awesome. We heard so much today. Our goal is just to keep the dialogue going, try to better understand everyone else's point of view. I learned something today. I hope you did too. If anyone has any, you know, last points, happy to hear them, you know. Yeah. Go ahead, Ann.
No, go ahead. I'm trying to save today's chat so I can capture all of you.
I'll email you the copy of the chat. It's saved automatically at the end. Okay. But you know, like if anyone has feedback about these town halls, I'd appreciate some feedback. And please be honest. I mean, you know, like my feelings won't be hurt. I'm actually thinking about inviting the other candidates to come in as well for maybe one of the future town halls, because Ann and I, you know, we've tried this. This is obviously a new thing, but we don't maintain exclusivity over it. We want this to be part of a movement to make Millbrae a more accessible government, because we think that when you conduct business in front of the public, then things will be more accountable and more representative of the community. In 2 weeks, I think, Ann, we want to, correct me if I'm wrong, we want to talk about water bills and infrastructure. I think we can go more in depth about that in 2 weeks. So that will be that in 2 weeks. And yeah, like I said, if anyone has ideas, email me, email Ann, both of us. Our campaign assistant, Rochelle, is available too. Yeah, I mean, thank you for taking the time. I know, like, it's Saturday. Ann, any last thoughts? We're almost there. We are there.
Thank you so much. Again, we're still learning how to do it. I appreciate Yo-Yo and all the technical side on that. You can always reach out to either of us with questions. Sadly, government never moves as quickly as we might want it to move, but specific questions and things we can try to answer on there. And I would say, please, as the COVID cases are going up, please wear your masks in public. Make sure to wash your hands. I know the data is not as good as it should be or could be. We had a discussion up at Taylor today during the Chalk event about how maybe the data could be better. It's just been a real interesting couple of months, but keep yourself safe. Another project we are starting to look at is long-term isolation on that. I would love, I see some seniors on the call. Tell me what you think, what your concerns are so that we can begin to come up with solutions for isolation. I'm going to be going for surgery. So for 2 weeks, I won't be able to walk or walk and do groceries. I won't be able to walk and do groceries at the same time. And I, for the first time, I'm going to have to ask for help. And asking for help is really hard. So I wonder how many of our seniors are home, or people with high comorbidities are at home and don't want to ask. And I am worried. We had a big discussion last week on food insecurity, and we want to make sure that we are feeding our people in Millbrae. That's probably my next highest concern, is just who is going hungry right now and how can we help?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you, everyone. You know, like we've enjoyed the company. We will be in touch by email. I hope the emails have not been too intrusive. I know, you know, like I'll close with this thought. We want to be good members of the community first, not politicians, not campaigners. We want to be your neighbors first, because we are. And, you know, and everybody, you know, including the other candidates in this election, everyone is just being sort of like as respectful as possible during COVID, because we know it's a tough time. We know that it's always changing, and there's no right or wrong way to campaign. We're just trying to be as helpful as possible to people during this, in our own little spheres of influence. So that's why we hold these. You know, we appreciate you coming. We're going to try to keep them as relevant as possible. Ann and I, just one campaign note, Ann and I will need to get 20 signatures each. You can sign both of our papers to nominate us for office next week, starting next Monday. So if anybody is interested in helping us out, it will be a socially distant method, and you can sign using your own pen. But we just need to collect 20 signatures. So if anyone can help us out, I'll actually have our campaign assistant send an email out. If you can help, please just reply, and we'll make a socially distant visit for you to help us out with your signature. We need 20 signatures to get on the ballot, so that'd be really awesome if you can help out. And later on this month, actually, probably, is it August? No, it's July. Yeah, never mind. Later we'll have the lawn signs and everything, but yeah. Anyways, see everybody in 2 weeks. Hope everyone stays cool and stay safe.
Thank you all.
Thank you.